So Will and Harper is a documentary road trip starring Will Ferrell and Harper Steele. Now, everybody knows who Will Ferrell is. I'm sure he needs no introduction for this film. But Harper Steele might, just because for two reasons. One is because Harper Steele was very much a woman who operated behind the scenes. She was a writer on Saturday Night Live. She stuck by Will Ferrell for a lot of his projects, and in fact, as the film begins, Ferrell actually outlines a lot of the types of films that they were involved with, and he kind of more or less kind of blames her for saying hey, all that stuff I was in, you want to know who's responsible for that? That's Harper's doing. But the other reason that a lot of people might not know who Harper Steele is because she is a fairly recently transitioned woman. Before this, she was known as Andrew Steele. And a few years ago, she decided to come out as transgender. And, she went about, changing her gender. And she realized that, this might be a rocky transition, not so much for herself, but for others to accept her. So she basically made this big announcement that she sent out to all her friends saying hey, I'm going to be transitioning to a woman now. And, I understand it might be difficult for some of you to accept, but this is something that I got to do. And I try not to be political, but, now that I am, becoming a transgender woman, now my life is going to be very political. So I just thought I'd all let you know. And the least you could do is just, try to address me as such and, get the pronouns right. So Will Ferrell, having learned this, was very intrigued because he had worked with Harper for such a long time. And he was like, well, how do I get used to my friend? What do I say? Which I do with them, and it all comes out of a spot of love, where it's just he wants to do what's right for Harper, and still be the friend that he's always been. That the same person who they would trade jokes with, how they'd write sketches on SNL, how they'd bicker about beer and go into bars and have lots of drinks and stuff like that. They're very much the same people, but at the same time, Will realizes that things are different now, and we kind of got to address this. And the thing is, I love how Will wants to be open with it, but he doesn't want to be direct with it. He wants to kind of ease Harper into this. So the best way that they find to do this is just to take a road trip where they go to a lot of familiar spots and also a lot of new spots as well, to try to get used to Harper in this with her new gender, as being a woman. So they go to there's a lot of cameos in the film. They end up contacting Kristen Wiig over the phone and say hey, you should make a cute little theme song for this film, which he does reveal by the end of the film. They stop by Saturday Night Live, where they visit with a few people who work there, and they discuss what it was like working there, and they share some warm memories. But then when they get back, every time they get back on the road, that's when it's kind of the question and answer time, where Will just kind of cautiously asks about, how did you know when you want to transition to a woman? What aspects of surgery were you considering? What thoughts were going through your head? And just a lot of curious questions that are asked very cautiously and innocently, but also in a manner that's earnest and honest, where Harper's yeah, bring him up. I'm not afraid. I'm in my 60s. I've faced a lot of stuff. Go ahead, ask me anything. And I love that Will accepts that offer, and he doesn't try to pussyfoot around a lot of stuff with Harper. He actually asks her questions that are on his mind and stuff that he's wondering about. At the same time, he still finds just the right moments to crack jokes. At one point, when he's asking about Harper's breasts, he brings up how how is it having your new rack and then going into Nordstrom Rack, and it's just one of those really silly jokes that Harper just kind of turns to Will and is just okay, that's actually a pretty good joke. And then they both kind of turn to the camera and then try to explain the joke, to kind of like, like elongate it further by saying like, oh, Will just wrote like the best joke of the year. Here's how it works. You see, Rack is like they just go into like this whole bit where there are a lot of like sweet moments like that where they're just they connect so well. At the same time, there is some drama in this film where it doesn't shy away from the aspects where Will does stumble. Because at one point during the trip, Will Ferrell puts on like his Sherlock outfit from like the recent film that he was working on, that Sherlock that Sherlock Holmes film from like a few years back. He puts it on and goes into like this Texas steak joint where they have like one of those like, like eat this much meat in an hour and it's free. And he decides to accept the challenge of Sherlock Holmes. And of course, and he does it like it's a big production. They put you up on a big table and they time it. So he goes at it dressed as Sherlock Holmes. But Harper is sitting right across the table from him. And Harper is looking out at the audience, who are all like kind of like filming Will Ferrell and taking photos and video. And she knows what's going to happen. She knows the moment that those photos go online, she knows that transphobia is going to happen there. She knows that Will Ferrell is going to get criticized for being seen with a trans woman, even though this is a trans woman that Will Ferrell has known for a long time and was a close friend and coworker. So to have that transphobia come out there, it's one of those things that like Will feels like, oh my God, I did this. Like I tried to make fun and, make a bit of a scene and just have fun. And I ended up putting you in the crosshairs, and it tears him up inside because like, he wants to, have fun and take the edge off. But still just doesn't want to hurt his friend, and realize that in that moment, yeah, he accidentally stumbled and actually, caused some hurt. But Harper, she's understanding, like she's faced it before, but she tries to like also walk Will Ferrell through it to let him know that, when you face this online, it's like, yeah, you're going to get a lot of it and you kind of more or less have to brush it off. But at the same time, you can't just treat it as nothing. Like there is something there, and it does linger, and it does hurt, and it is something that has to be addressed, and it's approached in like in a very mature way, where it's like the bias is acknowledged there, because like at one point Harper reads off a mean tweet directed at Will from that event, saying that Will is like he's become like a socialist, Marxist, whatever the names that people associate with those who align themselves with trans people and show trans allyship. And Will's reaction is just kind of like, like Harper asks him, like, how does that make you feel? And he's just like, I don't really feel anything. That's just a nonsense statement. And Harper's just like, well, it's not to me, because I get stuff like that all the time, and it's not good. You can't just brush it off like that, and you got to like consider that aspect. So while Will does get very vulnerable with admitting like he doesn't know quite how to navigate all this and is still learning along the way, the more he does try to put Harper more at ease. Like at one point they go out to dinner and they dress up entirely different from how they usually look. Like they try to go out to a fancy restaurant, so Will kind of like tries to take a little bit of like the attention off by dressing up as the most absurd type of character that you wouldn't usually associate with Will Ferrell. And it kind of like it almost kind of like feels like they're both going on a covert dinner. And I think it was very sweet the way that that like Harper brings up how she brings up everything that Will has done for her up to that point, and stresses that, look, most allies wouldn't do this for a trans person, and most trans people wouldn't have this level of support. But still having it there, still having a friend there who's willing to be there with you through thick and thin, and just stick with it even like when like the spotlight's on you, that it manages to help Harper come out of her shell a little bit more. Especially like for launching herself into these somewhat dangerous situations. Like at one point she goes to a small town bar, which would seem like not a good spot, not a very safe spot to go to. And there's some intensity there because she can feel at the moment that she walks in, and there's Trump campaign flags on the wall. And she's uncertain of like this situation where I believe that they were in a bar in Oklahoma. So she's not quite sure how this is going to go down. But as she starts talking to other bar patrons there and kind of like easing her way into conversations and just kind of like casually bringing up that she's trans, she kind of eases into it. And it's one of those things where she just kind of like, she says like, hey, Will, stay outside. I don't want your protection initially. I want to see if I can navigate this on my own. And eventually, after being in there for a while, she just calls him Will Ferrell. It's like, okay, it's cool. Why don't you come on in and we can surprise all these people. Will Ferrell's here and all that. And yeah, like Harper becomes increasingly more comfortable with opening up to Will as the film goes on. Like, obviously, like, they have no problem cracking jokes with each other. Like, there's a great running gag about how Will really wants Dunkin' Donuts and Harper will never pull over for them. But Harper literally lets Will visit, like, her dark place, like, when she felt at her lowest, and it's still tough for her. Like, when she visits this particular location that just, it feels like almost like a cave of her sorrows. She's kind of like crying about it, but like Will's just kind of like, yeah, you opened up to me, you showed me this, and even when like Harper admits like, there's still secrets that I want to keep from you, Will finds just the right moment to joke about it and says like, well, I'm gonna find them. You like that. I know you have a secret about a good record store, but I'm gonna find it. I'm gonna get it out of you. So yeah, it's very charming. It's very, very sweet. It's very sincere, but also very honest and blunt at times. With Will Ferrell just basically trying to figure out how to be an ally to trans people without being that typical like that kind of like obnoxious, like cringy type of trans ally who does nothing but spout catchphrases, and they wear all like the trans flag all over themselves, and they keep shouting like trans rights and stuff like that. And I think that's more like a different dynamic with Will and Harper, because like they're both like middle-aged people who feel like like they don't have the same eccentricities, even though Will does still have a little bit of that acting prowess in him where he can still like shout and still make stuff funny. But they're, they realize, yeah, that they're older and like the world is going to be much different from them, but they still have a very optimistic outlook on life. Like, I really like the fact that, Harper did bring up how, yeah, she still wants to, she still wants to date. She wants to go out there and maybe, find someone else that, she can, pick up at a bar, spend a night with, and, talk about how stupid the movie last night was that they watched, and she realized that might be a little bit corny, but that's like one of the wonderful things that she would want to experience in life again. And it doesn't seem like it's too impossible. At least like, like she realized that, yeah, like I'm in my 60s, the clock is ticking here, but hey, if it's ticking, at least she can have someone like Will Ferrell by her side to constantly be there for her and listen to her and still crack some jokes and have some fun with every once in a while. So yeah, it's a wonderful friendship that's worth documenting, and I think is a fairly important documentary to show, just how easy it is to be a trans ally to that degree. Because I think like a lot of people have like this misconception where like, they're not sure, and they're fearful about acting around a trans person. Like they worry that they're going to say the wrong thing. But at least from like Harper's perspective, the way that she goes about it, like at one point, she's shaking hands with somebody and they misgender her, and she's just kind of like, well, I'm not a sir, I'm a man, and I'm a ma'am, and like it's like, oh, okay, and she kind of like jokes like, you want to try that again? Like, yeah, sure, and then it goes easily like that. So yeah, it's like misgendering is not the end of the world so long as you don't, as long as it's a mistake and you don't mean it, obviously. So just, yeah, and it seems like such an obvious thing for those who are like used to being around trans people, but I think having it be like a more like vocal and interpretation and to show these very important aspects of what it is to be like a trans ally and have like Will Ferrell being behind it. I think makes the documentary a little bit more essential and important. Where I think it's going to go a long way towards towards just acceptance of those who transition. So yeah, on that level alone, like yeah, the film is worth watching, but it's also just worth watching just because it's sweet and it's funny, and I burst out laughing a few times at just Will's just ease of jokes that he has on this road trip. So yeah, it was just a genuinely sweet film to watch unfold, and I'm so glad that this relationship between Will and Harper has remained strong all these years and continues to go pretty damn strong.